Celebrating 30 years of phenomenal trend forecasting. Here's Gerald Celente with today's trends in the news.
Hi, this is Gerald Celente. It's Wednesday, November 27th, 2019. And here are some of today's trends in the news on the day before Thanksgiving. Over in Asia, markets mixed, up a little bit, but mixed in Europe. New highs in USA. Oil down a bit. Gold keeps going down. And what else do we got here? Bitcoin, up a little bit. Stocks rise for a fourth day in a row, hit record highs. Strong economic data supported the gains. Durable good orders rose in October. Economists thought they would go down. Third quarter GDP was revised to show growth of 2.1%. That's up from a previous reading of 1.9%. And what else do we have over here? On Tuesday, President Donald Trump said negotiations were close to reaching an initial trade deal. Stocks are set for a strong finish to the year, said Nick Colas, co-founder of Data Trek Research, in a note. Not only are cyclical groups working, but interest rates also remain low. That's the story. This time last year, they were pushing interest rates up. December came around. It's only a couple of days away. And we had the worst December since the Great Depression. They were going to raise interest rates another 2 to 3 times in 2019. But on January 4th, 2019, Fed Chair Jerome Powell said, well, we're going to be patient. Yeah, we're not going to be patient. They're going to lower them. They did. They're juicing the markets. In the repo markets this past Tuesday, the New York Federal Reserve dumped in, ready? $92.7 billion to give the money junkies the fix to keep this thing going. And that's what's pumping it up, and it's being pumped up around the world. Again, India, the market's hitting a new high as the economies keep going lower. This has no connection at all to reality. The street is a different street than Main Street. Oil eased on Wednesday after reports showed U.S. crude inventories grew unexpectedly last week, and gasoline stocks surged. But losses were limited by optimism that a U.S.-China trade deal would be reached soon. If a trade deal is reached, and I believe one will be, and maybe another one will be before the election in 2020, it's going to do next to nothing to change the course of the global economy. It's all talk. Oil prices pared losses slightly after a report that U.S. oil drillers reduced the number of drilling rigs for a record 12 months in a row. More supply than demand. Total rig count is the lowest since April 2017. And the OPEC gang and the other members are going to meet next week in Vienna to see if they're going to continue to hold back 1.2 million barrels a day, which of course they will. And gold went down. Why? Because of optimism. Now, in the trade deal, it's not why it's going down. It's going down because the gamblers are dumping more dough into the equity markets. They're being artificially propped up, and they don't need gold as a safe haven asset just now. And again, you've heard me say this 100 times. If gold goes below $14.50 an ounce, and it's getting closer to that, it could hit the low, which my bottom is at $1,390. Trade decline in September dashes hope of recovery. This is from the Financial Times. Trade decline. World trade contracted sharply in September, dashing hopes that the global downturn that has been weighing on exporters had bottomed out. Compared to the same month last year, global trade contracted by 1.1% in September, making the fourth consecutive year-on-year contraction. 4 consecutive year-on-year contraction. How long has the trade war been going on? Not for 4 years. It's a global slowdown. They do not report this, only in little bits and pieces. They're saying here that it's the longest period of falling trade since the financial crisis in 2009. Beyond the China-U.S. trade deal, the loss of trade momentum has been widespread across goods and countries. It has nothing to do with the trade deal. In September, trade volume in emerging nations other than China were down 3.3% compared to the same time last year. Again, what's propping the market up? The big guys with their stock buybacks and their mergers and acquisitions, which takeovers top $70 billion in one day of big deals as confidence returns to the United States. Multinationals unleash a wave of takeovers, agreeing more than $70 billion in deals. You ready? As companies targeted the booming U.S. market to squeeze out competitors and find new sources of growth. Squeeze out the competitors. Get bigger. Own more. That's right. It's Slavelandia. The multinational plantation. This is their language. Squeeze out competitors. Industry leaders such as used discount brokerage, Charles Schwab, French luxury powerhouse, LVMH, Swiss drug company, Novartis, and Japanese conglomerate Mitsubishi snapped up rivals to extend dominance in their sectors, okay? Dominance in their sectors. We own it all. You count for nothing. I could go on with this, and it keeps reinforcing what I've been saying all along. These mergers and acquisitions, these hedge funds, all of this is killing the global economy because it's putting all the power and all the money into the elites. And that's why when you make the globalnomic connections, you see revolts going on in Bolivia, in Peru, in Colombia, in Chile, in Ecuador, in Lebanon, in Hong Kong, in Spain, in France, in Guinea, in Sudan, over and over, Algeria, because the rich have everything and they don't want to give any more to anybody else. Luigi Di Vecchi, who chairs investment bank in Europe at Citigroup, said, quote, cash-rich companies are once again targeting the U.S. market as many emerging markets represent a more dangerously risk-reward equation. Cash-rich companies, not building bigger businesses, gobbling up others, firing a lot of people, and pushing more money up to the top. Beijing raises hopes for trade agreement. Again, this trade agreement is not going to make any big difference at all. And you're only hearing it from the Trends Journal. Everybody else is saying markets are going up and down on it. And China's central bank issues warning over household debt. China's central bank has warned over the dangers of rapid buildup in household debt, urging greater oversight of mortgages and consumer loans to decrease risks to the country's financial system. Quote, the debt risk of the households sector and some low-income households in some regions are relatively prominent and should be paid attention to. Again, their household debt is a bit smaller than in comparison to U.S. household debt. And household debt is just going to keep going up. Again, a big story in your current Trends Journal about household debt, what it means and where it's going. Mexico economy stagnated in third quarter. Activity was flat following 3 quarters of negative output, putting the economy on track for the worst yearly performance since the Panic of '08. But they got a solution. Mexico eyes infrastructure spending spree to spur growth. Again, we've been writing about this. They're already going down. They're deep in debt. They're going to go deeper in debt with infrastructure spending. All this is more bullshit. That's all it is. Again, you have a global slowdown. Hey, has nothing to do with China trade deal, does it? The third quarter of this year, growth was 0 after falls of 0.1% in the fourth quarter of 2018 and each of the first 2 quarters of 2019. And it looks like it's going to get worse. Audi to cut 9,500 positions in sluggish auto market. I mention this because the auto market is the one to look at. And it's slowing down around the world. People can't afford it. Vacant storefronts are decked out for the holiday in New York, New York. Some empty storefronts on Fifth Avenue are getting dolled up for the holiday. They're empty. New York City has struggled with empty storefronts in recent years. The retail availability on the upper Fifth Avenue between 49th and 60th Street was nearly 30% in the third quarter. The availability rate between 42nd and 49th Street was 16%. This is in the richest area. There is a real estate slowdown in New York City that's much bigger than this. Investors follow tracks of millennials into U.S. mountain states. It's about millennials leaving the big cities and going into different areas because they can't afford it. And the same thing is happening up here in Kingston, Colonial Kingston. 2 hours, 90 miles from New York City, straight up the Hudson River. You can't afford the city's lost its vibe, and they're looking for new places to live. We've been writing about this for years. It's part of the organic growth city trend. In your Trends Journal history, way before it happens. You hear all this talk, the Chinese are stealing our technology. No, they're not. The United States and Europe gave it to them so they could get their stuff made in China very cheaply. And now, U.S. companies prop up China's surveillance network. Critical pieces of China's cutting-edge surveillance state share a connection. They come from America. And the story goes on to show how all the top tech companies are giving all of this stuff to China so they could spy on people, facial recognition, watch, look, and listen to everything that they're doing in a country near you next. Freedom. Beijing condemns U.S. law on human rights in Hong Kong. The Hong Kong Human Rights and Democracy Act, which has been passed by both the House and Senate, is expected to become law in coming days, even if U.S. President Donald Trump does not formally sign it. So they're against this. And the United States is going to be changing. This might hurt the trade deal if the United States continues to go ahead with this. Now on to some international news. Sweden investigates Iraq defense chief for war crimes. The defense. Hey, Sweden, how about investigating George W. criminal warmonger Bush and all the other slimers around him like Penis Cheney and Condoleezza Rice, and crap flows down the Colin Powell. Yeah, how about them? And that other guy Rumsfeld. And how about Bill Clinton for his war crimes against Iraq? And how about Barack, the Nobel Peace of Crap Prize winner Obama, for the war crimes committed against Libya and Syria? How about those war crimes? No, we're not going to look at that because we're like the rest of where they all do. You crack down hard on the little people and you bow down and suck up to the big ones. It's no different anywhere. The Iraqi, Iraq. Hey, how did this happen in Iraq? A war crime started by Bush and Blair. Another piece of garbage. I forgot Sarkozy and Cameron. Oh, and you remember the troop surge by Barack Obama in Afghanistan, folks? What a bunch of garbage. Big story. I don't have enough time to go into it. More U.S. troops in Mideast may not prevent attack by Iran. General warns. General jerk. The deployment of 14,000 additional American troops to the Persian Gulf region since the spring has probably not dissuaded Iran from planning a major attack on the scale of the recent missile and drone assaults on Saudi Arabia's oil fields, the commander of the American forces in the Middle East says. There is no proof that Iran did this, but they lie about it, and so too does the general. Yeah. My judgment is that they very possibly will attack again, said General McKenzie. And he also said they will attack again. They didn't attack before. You have no proof. Hey, but I'm the general. You gotta salute. Unfortunately, sometimes the Iranian regime has proved itself to be the bully in the neighborhood. The bully in the neighborhood? You're supporting the bullies in the neighborhood. How about Saudi Arabia? Oh, we won't talk about Yemen because we're slimers. Yeah, the worst humanitarian crisis on earth. But don't say a word. Don't say a word because the United States is supplying the armaments to make that happen. And again, they're building up the troops over there. Watch out for war to break out between Iran and Israel. When all else fails, they take you to war. Netanyahu can't get reelected, can't form a coalition government, and he's stepping it up and going to do more against Syria and kill more Iranians there. Keeps going on. Pompeo warns China about rights in Hong Kong. He said the U.S. has been pretty clear about our expectations on how Beijing will treat people throughout the country. We have human rights standards. Human rights standards? You have no standards. You are a lovely man of murder. Oh, yeah, how about what you're doing over there in Venezuela? How about Iran, huh? Yep. Human rights. The line that they keep using to invade other countries. Oh, but we won't talk about what's coming up next. Saudi Arabia is stepping up a crackdown of dissent, rights groups say. Oh, yeah, but it's okay for Saudi Arabia to do that. But little Pompeo, I should say big Pompeo, talks about rights in Hong Kong. But when you sell hundreds of billions of dollars of weapons to the Saudis to slaughter people in Yemen, then them rights don't count. And what rights does Saudi Arabia have? You know what kind of rights they have? They have rights of bullshit. You got it. Air crash kills 13 French soldiers in Mali. All your stories about Mali in the Trends Journal. The French have no business being there. It's a former colony. They're there for the natural resources, primarily uranium, and they have more nuclear power plants than any place else on Earth. And it's all breaking out around that area. And this area was stable before the United States, Barack Obama, Sarkozy and Cameron and the NATO freaks overthrew the Libyan government. And when that happened, the Gaddafi government, these people left Libya and they went back into these areas. And it's getting ugly and will only get worse. And all the military action by outsiders will not do anything to solve the problem because the proof is there. Hasn't solved it before. Deadly quakes in Albania inflame political crisis. So these earthquakes, and they're not doing enough to make it happen, but I'm pointing this out because opposition parties have demanded fresh legislative elections, and thousands of people have regularly marched in Tirana complaining about the corruption in the Prime Minister Edi Rama's government. I mention this because it's the same story in Bolivia, in Colombia, in Chile, in and out around the world. Freaks and fools, liars and thieves running a country near you. And again, this is coming down big, and it's going to be a real big one. It's going to be one of our top trends for 2020, which we'll be putting out shortly. We're losing people. Adults across the U.S. are dying. Life expectancy in America has declined over a period of 3 years, a drop driven by higher death rates among people in the prime age of life. It goes on. I'm mentioning that because people are dying of depression, they're dying of suicide, they're dying of obesity. As the standard of living drops and the hopes for the future decline, so too is the life expectancy. Alcoholism, another big one. So they found that the increased death rates among people in midlife extended to all racial and ethnic groups and to suburbs and cities. I mention this because it's going to continue to go lower if we don't occupy peace. So please do what you can to help support us with OccupyPeace.com. It's going down big, and the world is on fire, and we're getting closer to war. If we don't stop it, this will be the last war in our lifetime. As Einstein said, I don't know how the Third World War will be fought, but the fourth will be fought with sticks and stones. And then finally, I talked about, and you got the trend piece, about my meeting John Connally, who was the governor of Texas, who sat in front of JFK and took the bullet in the back. And I told that story. This is in the toilet paper of record. I've also mentioned that there was nothing in the major media about John F. Kennedy's death on November 22nd, some 56 years ago. Not even a mention. But this is how they're using it. JFK. Oh, they wrote about John F. Kennedy? Nope, this is in the toilet paper record, a full-page ad 2 days later. JFK, justice for the Kurds. Justice for Kurds. And using JFK, on October 30th, 2019, Justice for Kurds announced its advisory council in the New York Times and told our Kurdish friends, you're not alone. Our Kurdish friends. Oh, yeah. The United States illegally in Syria. The Kurdish-Turkish thing, the Ottoman Empire, this has been going on for a long time. We have no business being there. The United States is illegally there. And little clowns like Bill Maher support this. JFK, what a disgrace. Hey, but that's what America's become, a disgrace. It's Thanksgiving. I'm thankful for being a true American, one that looks at the Constitution and the Bill of Rights for what it is, to give me the freedom of who I am. Happy Thanksgiving. See you next week.